the first talk of track 1, the big room track, is Alex Saveau. He comes all the way from Seattle. He's a GDE. And he's going to talk about dynamic app modules building for the next billion.
If so,
give him a round of applause.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? Had a good lunch? Woo! All right. So yeah, I'm going to give you like a brief intro of dynamic app modules, like how you can get started, some best practices, some tips, that sort of thing. OK, so dynamic app modules, right? What are they? So you can basically imagine you have your different features, right, in your app. And instead of putting them all together and downloading them all at once, you're going to be taking them piece by piece. So here, like the arrows, like you could just start with maybe like your trash feature or something. And then later on, like your user decides they want to do something else. And so then you're going to like download that feature and bring it on later. So it lets you save the user's data, save space. You can also like uninstall these modules later. It's basically just this idea of having bringing down your features only when you need them. So some use cases like Google provides and some things I think can be useful. If you have like really big features, you know, like something, maybe like you have a ton of assets or whatever, and you don't need them like right away, right when your user's first coming on. You want to give like your user that initial download so they can have it like immediately, you know, start playing with your app, that sort of thing. So if you don't need these big features, you can delay their installation to later. So that could be things like, you know, if you have premium features, right? Your user's going to have to go through the Play Store dialog anyway if they want to download it and get like your upgrades. So that's like not really an issue UX-wise. If you also have like personalization options, just these sort of extra things that maybe your user doesn't need right away. Another use case, right? If you have stuff that's just for like one audience, maybe you have like a buyer-seller sort of thing. Your buyers, right, that's going to be like your main use case. Like people are going to come to the app, they want to like buy something. And then some of them, you know, they're maybe going to want to say, OK, I have stuff I can sell. But that's like not everybody. So you could download the selling functionality later for those users. And then if you have like app variants, this is a potential replacement where you could like swap your features around. But that's like more advanced stuff. And then lastly, like if you have features that your users aren't using a lot, and it's just kind of this niche thing, you might not want to download it like immediately. So like some examples, say you have like you're scanning a card, or this thing you're just going to use once, right? So you can have it, you download it, and then once you're done, you get rid of it. And so the reason you'd want to do that is because of this graph. So Google likes to show this. Basically, as your APK size goes up, you're going to get less successful installs, and then people are going to uninstall your app more. So if you think about, right, you have your phone, and then it doesn't maybe have a lot of space in emerging markets. Well, the Play Store dialog, when you want to download a new app, they're going to show you, you know, like this list of apps, and the bigger apps are going to be on top. So if your app is like really big, it's going to be the first on the chopping block, and that would be sad for you. So the idea is you can also like uninstall these features. So once you have them, maybe your user doesn't use them anymore. If it's just like this one-time thing, then you can just get rid of it, and then it's gone off the disk, and you're saving actual like storage space too on top of data. So yeah, lastly, just if you're thinking about, you know, what can I do with these dynamic features, don't put them everywhere, because it does take time. You got to download and install this extra APK, and that's going to be like maybe a 15, 30-second thing. So it's not like the end of the world, but it's also not, it's like a significant piece of time when you're thinking about like designing UX for this. So what's going to power this, right? So we've had the APK forever, and we need this new format, because now we're having these features and they're being downloaded independently. So that's where this thing Google announced at, I believe, IO 2017, could be wrong, but Android app bundles. So what these are, it's essentially like a new format for split APKs. So today, like, you could already be using a split APK, and that's basically where you're going to tell the Android Gradle plugin, hey, I only want like APKs based on CPU architecture, or maybe like you have different densities and assets, and you only want to give like your MDP like devices just their stuff, so they don't have to download things they don't need. So you could already do that, but it was like manual, and you had to set it up yourself, and then you upload a bunch of APKs, and it's just like, it's a lot of effort. So these Android app bundles, they're basically doing this all for you. You put it all together, they're gonna make it in this better format that lets the Play Store generate essentially split APKs for you. So that's where Google Play App Signing comes in. Because, right, if you're going to make your APK yourself, you have to give it, a signing key, and you say, I'm the author. But now, because you're uploading just this bundle, you're telling Google Play, okay, here's all my resources, everything I've got. Go make these split APKs for me. So that means that the Play Store is going to have have access to your signing key so they can pretend to essentially be you. And if you go through like the Play console, they have some nice docs, and it's fairly simple to get going. But that's just something to note. You'll have to enable that. And it's not enabled by default for existing apps. And then this is key. So today, you can use Android app bundles without having to do anything. You just go to Android Studio. If you have, I believe 3.2 is when they released it. Just go in there, like you'll have your menu, and then alongside Build APK, they have this option to build app bundles. And if you're doing it from the command line, it'll be like /gradlew bundle. So already today, you can upload app bundles, and that gives you space savings for density and language. So things like you couldn't even do with split APKs. So your app bundles are the Play Store's already gonna generate stuff just for like the device's language and just for its density. So they also have like this nice chart. Once you do it, they show you like your space savings. So today you should already be thinking about that. And it's a fairly simple thing. So I would just recommend, like, if there's one thing you take away, it's just start using the app bundles already today. So if you're going to get into the dynamic app modules part of this, you're downloading features independently, right? So that means this can't all be in one big clump, because then there's no way to download all of this stuff separately. So that's where your it's a tough word to pronounce. Can't do it, okay. Nope. Okay, but so what is it? Basically, you're gonna take this monolith, right? You have one big chunk, and then you're just splitting it out into maybe libraries you can use within the app or across your company. And then finally, you have your base and your features. So libraries is kind of going to be above. That's more of a general sort of thing. It might be specific to your app, but not necessarily. And then your base is just going to be this kind of shell. I'll go over it a little bit more. And then from the shell, we add on top features. So what does this look like in terms of like a structure? So if you have your different Gradle modules, you're starting out with your monolith, and now you're going to move that over, and you're going to have maybe some libraries, like a common library, stuff to handle like data and UI. Maybe you have some common widgets, that sort of thing. Then you split that all out. You have your bunch of features, and then it's going to come back together into your app. And then these features, they can be like whatever you want. I just gave the examples I had earlier. And so now your app isn't really like an app. It's more of like the home section. So like the new Google apps have, right, the bottom app bar. So that would maybe be what you'd have. You'd just have this shell, and then with your bottom app bar. And then your actual features are like the fragments that go in there. So modularization, kind of got it? Yeah. So this is really the hardest piece. If you have that done, actually, who has already like modularized? Well, I got it. Okay. So a few people. So like if you have that done, you're basically set. The rest is easy. But if you don't, these are just a bunch of links, other talks that I thought might be helpful, and they'll like give you some deeper insight into how you can actually go about doing that for your app. So if you do have it done, this is where you can start just setting up what you need to get going for your dynamic app module. So first of all, this structure is going to change. So if you just modularized your app like the normal way and you're not really thinking about dynamic app modules, right, you're going to have something like this where you have all your features and they come into your app. But remember, now we're still building something that's just like, it's a big blob, it's a big chunk. So we're going to need to flip that around. So the new structure is essentially you're going to have this base, and that's what I was mentioning before. And so this base is like before your features. So it's going to be like that home for all your features without having direct access to them. So a bit more details on this. Your base, it's like kind of like a library, but it's not really. It doesn't do anything, and it just kind of provides a framework for your features to live in. So yeah, it's got the UI that'll collect all these features together in something coherent, and it doesn't really do anything. Your features, on the other hand, right, they're going to be like some logical piece, maybe like a few activities, a flow, or if you're doing like the single activity model Google's been pushing, it might be like a collection of fragments or something. And yeah, they're independent, so they don't really know about each other's existence. They're just doing their own thing, and they only know about the base. And then they do feature stuff, right? That's where all your code and logic and that sort of thing is going to live. So then getting into like some structure tips, you would want to organize. Basically, like it'll make it. I'll show you how that makes it easier. But some structure I find is practical is you just have like a library folder, and then you put all your libraries in there, and then you're going to have like a feature folder, put all your features, and then you have this app folder, and that's where like your base is going to live. And then maybe if you have like something else, like your website or whatever. And this would be like your Gradle project structure. So just a few more conventions. Your package name, the base should just be what you already have. That's just your standard package name. Features, I personally like to just add a dot feature, but you can go either way as long as you just kind of extend the base package. Technically, you don't have to, but that would seem weird to me if you didn't. And then libraries are just, whatever. It can be, if you want, you can extend your base. Otherwise, if it's like shared within the company. But yeah, so if you're following those conventions, then it's going to make configuring your build for these dynamic features a lot easier. So you can start by just having your root Gradle file. You're just going to open up an all projects Lambda, and then in there you have your group, and so that would be your the directory. Like instead of a slash, they just make it be a dot. So we can just split it on the dot and just say if it contains like a library. So if we're in the library folder, let's apply the library plugin. If we're in a feature folder, let's apply the dynamic feature plugin. And so this, if you don't want to follow this structure, that's basically the key change, is you're just going to be applying that plugin instead of a different one. And then if we're in our base, that's our usual application plugin. But by doing this, we have like very little to configure for each individual module. Because then we can go back and have defaults, right? So you might have like your compile SDK, like some target SDK stuff, maybe like support vector drawables or something. You could have that enabled for all your features, and then you don't have to like copy paste your build config everywhere. If you have like lint stuff, if you're targeting Java 8, that sort of thing. And then in your actual base module, you're just going to have your usual configuration, so that's what you already had with the default config, your keys, that sort of thing. And then this is the only other different part. You're going to start by basically grabbing the feature folder. It's actually like a list of projects from Gradle. But you're just going to grab them. You're going to say, hey, I want to put this into a set. And then you just map it to all the names. And so that's what the Android Gradle plugin wants. It just wants like the names of each of your modules. So yeah, if you organize it like that, it makes it really easy. You just add a new feature. You don't have to think about it. It'll just like magically work as long as you put it like in that same folder. And then for your build config for like each of the specific features, there's just your dependencies. That's what's nice about it. You don't have to like configure anything else because you've already configured that in your root module. But then, so we do have to add some extra manifest flags if we want it to be dynamic. So you put your usual package. That's just like you can use a convention I mentioned earlier. And then we're going to add this special dist tag. And so then here, this is where we're going to start telling the Play Store, here's like the feature module that I support. So this title, your string, you're actually going to want to put it in your base module, not one of the feature modules, because it all gets combined back into one manifest in your base. So it wouldn't be accessible otherwise. And I think it just won't compile if you don't do that. So if you get an error like that, you just got to remember, oh, got to move it over. Then we have this fusing option. To be fair, I don't know when you would ever set it to false. What it essentially means is on devices that don't support dynamic app modules, so that's, I believe, pre-API 19, they don't support split APKs, and that's how it works. Like you're going to, the Play Store downloads split APKs for you. But you don't have to worry about that. And so as long as you set this flag to true, on those older devices, they'll just get your old, big, monolith APK. And if you set it to false, there's just no way they get those features. So your app would kind of be broken. But I guess if you have a use case, maybe talk to me after. And then lastly, when you have your dynamic feature, you can choose whether or not you want it to be included. So for all of this, it's not like every feature has to be downloaded dynamically. It can actually be included. So that way, I would recommend you just make all of your features, just split them all out, have everything be modularized, and then you just flip the flag whenever you want something to be downloaded on demand. But yeah, and that's essentially it for configuration. So now if we want to talk back and forth, so I'm going to go fairly quickly through this since we don't have like a full 40 minutes, but so let's see. Basically, you're going to want to use like a lot of interfaces so you can just communicate directly. So the issue, right, is we have our base, and then on this other side, we have the features. But the base doesn't know about the features, right? Because if it did, then that means those features would be included when we download the base, and we don't want that, because otherwise we're just back to our old problem of a big monolith. So if you just define a bunch of interfaces in your base, for example, here you can have like a backpressed listener, and then like in your feature, you implement that in the fragment, and then you could just go and say, hey, all the fragments that are active, have any of them handled this backpress event? And then that way you could handle that in your activity. So for other, if you want to go like the other way around, that'll be you just, again, you still defining like your interface in the base, but then you implement it on the base side. And then stuff in your feature modules can just say like, is the activity or whatever it is, like if you have a fragment or something, does it implement this? So yeah, you're just going to want to use a lot of interfaces. But then the other main issue is we can't actually access code directly, right? So if you're trying to get a fragment or something like that, and you need maybe extra parameters, that sort of thing. Here, this example is pretty basic, but you'll probably want like parameters in your real life, like if you're specifying bundles or something like that. So when we come here, we can't access that directly. So then I'm going to skim through this, but the idea is you're basically going to use reflection, and we're going to use like the Kotlin's operator, the invoke operator, so we can simulate this sort of constructor. So our goal is to get to something that looks like this, and these slides will be available later so you can look at them. But we're trying to get like this. So what we're going to do is essentially we're going to define like some interfaces that say, is this thing downloadable? Is it already installed? And then we're going to go through, implement them like on the feature side. Then over here, this is the key part. If you want it to look nice, is you're going to use like this operator invoke thing. So you're just saying, here's what I expect from the feature. The feature is going to like implement that interface. Then in your base, you're going to say, how do I get this? And so that's where the reflection comes in. So you're going to grab it and then just cast it to whatever interface you define. And then it's as if you had the actual feature there with you. So then there are more examples for downloadable versus installed. And then in the end, it just kind of looks like this. So at the top, we've got our like what we expect from the feature, right? So in this case, it's just give me a fragment. And then in here, this is where we're extending some base class that has that operator invoke. So then when we're trying to access the feature, we just do the standard as if it were a constructor, but it's actually going through Kotlin's operator invoke. And yeah, then you can add like extra metadata for if you need that. And then for the actual instance, that's where we're going to use reflection. So you're just going to say, hey, I expect you to be here. If you're not here, well, something has gone wrong. So let's just blow up. And then that's where you're going to cast it to your actual like feature. So let's see. Yeah, so there I just have a few more examples for like if you were actually doing that. So you're just going to use your standard Java class reflection. You filter it, you do all that. What we're actually looking for, so if you didn't know this, Kotlin actually compiles companions down to like a static field, and you just have like a single instance. So we're looking for that. And basically through reflection, you're just going to want to grab that. So you have your class you expect to have, and then you're going to say, give me that field. So that's what this is all about. And let's see. That's not too important for this. So once you've used your reflection, you're grabbing this feature you're expecting to be here, or if it isn't there, you'll download it, and I'll go over that in just a bit. You could just run it as you normally would, and nothing will really have changed because you're still in like debug mode, and so then everything is still going to be packaged together. So as long as it compiles, it basically should work because nothing will have changed like at runtime. So then the big issue is when you have your release builds, right? So if you're actually going to run release builds, the code might not be there if you're using Proguard, like a minification, something like that. Proguard is probably going to remove it. So you just have to add some extra stuff since we're using reflection. So you can add this annotation, and then you just annotate whatever your features are. And then on like the Proguard side of thing, you're just going to say, keep this. I don't want you to remove my features. So yeah, again, the slides will be there so you can look at them more in detail. But once we've gotten to this point, this is where you're going to be able to download them on demand. So Google has some pretty good docs, and the API is like fairly simple. You're just going to grab their library. You're going to say, I want like this factory, and that's like you can give it any context. So here I just have like the general app context. And then to install it, you just give it a module name. So that's what you defined in your manifest. And then you just say install. And once it's done, you'll get like a callback. But if you want to show like progress, that's where this piece comes in. You have to like register a listener. And so Google has some pretty good docs. They have like a ton of error codes. Personally, I would just handle like if the feature's installed, then you're done. Otherwise, you can show like the user an error, tell them, try again, whatever you want to do. But essentially, this is the point where your designers are going to have to come in, because it's going to take like 15, 30 seconds. So they're going to want to like integrate that flow, figure out what UI you want to show. The Play Store isn't going to show anything. They're just going to say something is downloading. You'll have like a background notification, but the user would have to pull down the panel if they want to see it. Right, the only catch is if your module is more than 10 megabytes. In that case, the Play Store will show a dialog. It'll be like, hey, this feature is kind of big. Are you sure you want to download it right now? And then the user can say no, or they can keep going. But otherwise, it's all just happening in the background, and it's up to you to make sure the user knows something is going on. So coming back, we have, let's see. OK. So if you're doing this and you're downloading your features on demand, the issue is when you start this, that's fine. But then you have to remember that you started it, right? Otherwise, Play Store is just going to tell you, right, this was downloaded, but then what? You have to actually like keep going with whatever user action it was. So if they pressed a button or something, you have to remember that. So I would recommend just putting this all in a view model. And that's going to be saved across like activity restarts. So if your user does something else while waiting, you'll be totally fine. And so once you get the download event from Google with that listener you registered earlier, you just send that off to a live data. You say, OK, here's the feature that was downloaded. And now it's up to your activity to go back and say, OK, what feature was this? What was the user trying to do? Let me forward them along. And at that point, you just use it. You're still using reflection technically, but now your feature is actually there. And so then if we want to actually publish these, we're just doing it the standard way. You would just go to your console and upload the app bundle instead of your APKs. So some tips for this is when you're testing like your release builds and how does this actually work, like the end product, it's kind of slow, and Google knows this, and there's no real solution. As of yet, I'm assuming or hoping they're working on something. But if you have your debug builds, right, everything's just going to be included. And you can't like tell the Play Store, hey, download this feature because you haven't actually uploaded the feature. So it means you have to go through a full cycle of let me upload this, let me download my app through the Play Store, and let me see what happens like when I press the button. How does the feature like download, and how does my app react? There's no way to actually test this easily if you're just doing like debug builds and you're used to just pressing play in Android Studio. So I would recommend using the internal track. That one is really fast. It's like I usually will get updates within like 30 seconds from having pressed the upload button. And then another tip is you should look into this thing called Gradle Play Publisher. So disclaimer, I do work on it, so I might be biased. But essentially, it lets you, from the command line, you can just say, a Gradle task, I want to publish this. And so that will also make your cycles faster, because then you're not like dragging and dropping files around. So yeah, putting it all together, we started right with modularization. And then that's going to require Google Play App signing, because we're now telling Google, hey, here's this app bundle. Build all of these features for me. And then when you can, like, just try and always use app bundles, because you can today. And then that's already going to be saving your user space. And try to be consistent, follow like some best practices. And then if you use companion objects with like reflection, it actually works out pretty nice. So in Java, it's probably going to be a lot uglier. And then yeah, just make sure like when you're registering that listener and you're telling the Play Store, hey, start downloading this, make sure you're like showing the user that something is happening, because it does take a little while. And yeah, thank you.